My name is David Esrati. I'm running for Dayton City Commission. You have an election coming up November 5th. First opportunity in a while to really change things downtown. Last February, we were told that Commissioner Williams was resigning because of his new job. We were lied to. He was indicted in April. The FBI and the Department of Justice said there's a culture of corruption in Dayton. Now, how they come up with that by only indicting 4 African-American males, I don't know. But I've known that there's been a culture of corruption in this community for a long time. Access to the ballot, even who runs for office, is decided in back rooms long before the voters have a chance. I moved into Dayton and started working to fix up my house. I bought my house for $14,500. That's less than the price of a decent car, right? The city hassled me right away for putting up the wrong kind of garage doors in the historic district. I went down to City Hall and I expected a response when I went to talk to the people that we'd elected to represent us. No response. Things haven't changed 33 years later, except my neighborhood. South Park is a successful neighborhood now. South Park, when a house burns, it gets fixed back up. When a house gets foreclosed, it gets fixed back up. Houses that were foreclosed in 2012 are selling for $150,000, and they were foreclosed on for like 20. The house behind me sold first at 15, behind my office sold first for 15,000, then for 25,000, 2 different foreclosure sales. And then he put it on the market at $209,000. First day had 3 offers. He said to all 3, give me a better offer. One person offered $217, but it only appraised at $210. That doesn't happen in your neighborhood.
Nope.
I know a friend of mine whose father built a home in Dayton in 1963. That's a year after I was born. He built it for $19,500. Still lives in that home. He's taken care of it. He's fixed it up, lived there the whole time. It's still worth $19,500. Your home is supposed to be your biggest single investment. It's supposed to rise in value. But in our community, the only thing your home is looked at is a potential tear down, a demolition project, so that the demolition contractor can get paid and then slough off some money to these politicians who've been doing this to you. How do I know that? Well, look, they tore down the Schwind building downtown, beautiful terracotta building, and the Dayton Daily News building. They gave $2 million to a developer from Indiana. They hired Steve Roush to do the demolition. Steve does the demolition, says you didn't pay me enough, ends up owning only part of the building that he didn't tear down and screw up, the governor's old mansion, although the second part of it he wasn't supposed to tear down. Now has it on the market for $1 million. The people we gave the $2 million from we've never recovered. And then they had to pay another company, Blade Cutters, to fill in the hole. And the person who did that is still our city manager. And as of yesterday, you find out that her husband, who works at Wright State, is going to now be the director of business operations at Dayton Schools. But they forgot to put it on the agenda. Let me tell you, this is a culture of corruption all the way through. I've been fighting in lawsuits over the school closing task force, where they said they weren't a public body and they didn't have to meet in public. It just gets ridiculous what you have to go through to get things right. Now, in my neighborhood, we said, we're going to do this without the city. Now, granted, for a while, Miami Valley Hospital paid for 2 community-based police officers, and that made a huge difference for us. Hospital stopped paying for those community-based police officers after we all voted to raise our own income tax in Issue 9. You know who one of the biggest donors behind Issue 9 was? Premier Health. Because Nan and her crew promised more police officers, so we don't need to pay for police officers anymore. because you're going to pay for them now through this income tax. But the reality is Miami Valley Hospital now has their own police force. So does UD, so does Kettering Healthcare, so does Sinclair, so does Metro Parks. Who is over those police forces? Who did you elect to put University of Dayton police on the streets? Who have AR-15s in their cars? Who is over them? After the shooting of Samuel DuBose at the University of Cincinnati on the traffic stop, that should have been the end of these private police forces. They're private armies. Dayton used to have over 500 police officers and used to be able to give speeding tickets. Now we're at about 300 and change. And saying, oh, we don't have enough. Yet Sinclair's got 40, UD's got 40. All these other police departments, they're there. These are private armies. It has to stop. In fact, I believe it's unconstitutional. But take it or leave it. We've seen economic development dollars, which is code word for it. Let's give money to our future campaign contributors, and let's give it to rich people from out of town. Do projects downtown, then get them tax abated so they don't even have to pay a property tax. You and I are paying a property tax. And they're saying, oh, we don't have any money. Oh, the jobs that they create, well, they pay income tax, so we'll have money for the neighborhoods. But no, all it does is cycle back into the people's pockets that donate to the politicians. Now, if this sounds all gloom and doom to you, and I'm not sitting here lying to you, saying I'm going to create jobs, and I'm going to create opportunities for kids, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to tell you something. I listened to Matt Joseph and Chris Shaw say this stuff last night, and I've heard them say it over and over. In fact, I've heard Matt say it 4 times as he's gotten reelected, and he hasn't done a thing on that commission. He doesn't speak. He doesn't ask questions. He never votes no, except on one thing. He voted no on a thing about abortion. He's not, doesn't want the hospital. It was immaterial. It was the city getting involved in things for Nan's gubernatorial race and not about what happens to you and me in this community. But the reality is they have done nothing. And if they didn't know that Williams was doing deals and Rashad was doing deals, they should have. But they sit there, oh, there's no culture of corruption at all downtown. I think we'll see different when the FBI and the DOJ finally come around to doing some more indictments. We'll find out a lot more. Whether that's going to happen before the election or after, I do not know. So, I've got 5 issues that I talk about. The first one is our jail is unsafe. I would not let my worst enemy be taken into that jail for a drunk driving or a misdemeanor or anything else because it's dangerous. How dangerous is it? We've had people killed. We've had people in restraint chairs, pepper sprayed, point blank. If either of those people had had asthma, they could have died. They've broken people's arms, legs, they've had people die of bowel obstructions. It is not a safe jail. We pay money to the county to run that jail for each person that we put in there. I can't, as a city commissioner, allow somebody's child, somebody's husband, somebody's parent to be booked into that jail under my watch. And if you know anything about mental illness, you'll know that anybody who's got mental illness, people with mental illness in the family, the jail is one of the first places they stop because it's the largest mental health treatment facility in this county. About 25% of the people at any time in the jail are mentally ill, and they don't belong there in the first place. So that's the number one issue. People say, oh, that's a county issue. No, we pay the county for that. We used to run our own jail, and we didn't have these problems. So we've got to fix that. Second, I touched upon it briefly, is this idea of changing your taxes on your property because of what your neighbor does. I'm sorry. If my neighbor buys a new car, do my taxes on my car go up? No. I bought a house for $14,500. If you paid $210,000, you were prepared to pay that. But the reason my house is worth more is not because you paid more, it's because of what I did. And in any investment, any other real estate investment, anything else, You profit by that. That's your savings account. That's what you're supposed to do. Instead, you fix up your house, we tax you more. This has got to stop, especially in areas where you can't buy a house for over $50,000. You can't get a loan for a house because they're all under $50,000. This is insane. We are helping the banks redline. We are helping them discriminate against poor people. In our community, the property values are dropping. My neighborhood's different, but in general, on any given day, you can go buy a house in Dayton, Ohio for $20,000. Still, that should not happen. So we've got to stop this playing of games. All those buildings downtown, they don't pay property taxes.
Right.
You do. Why do we think our schools suck? It's not just the money, there's other things at play, but a big part of it is we don't do these things right. So the other problem is they take your tax dollars and they give them to businesses to come here, right? So the guys who built the Troll Pub down on Wayne, we paid $450,000 to buy the Supply One building, even though we had nothing to go in there. We speculatively bought it with our tax dollars. No public use, $450,000. We gave it to the Troll Pub people for $10. That's a $499,990 waste of our money. So they can do all this development. Chris Shaw says, we're leveraging your tax dollars. No, what you're doing is you're making it unfair to people like the ones that own Blind Bob's, the Oregon Express, Lily's, Lucky's, Corner Kitchen, Roost. All these businesses had to pay full price for their buildings. They had to go through all these hassles, and they didn't get tax abatement. And they didn't get their own garden station in for free either. That is not fair. So we have to have equal opportunity economic development in this city, or we don't have economic development at all. I mentioned briefly, I don't believe that all these private police forces should exist. If you want private police, you hire Dayton police. That's it. Otherwise, you get a security guard. He doesn't have a gun, he can't arrest you, he can't charge you with anything, he has to call the police to do that. That's the way it's supposed to work. And I still believe we have too many governments in Montgomery County. Why some of these little banana republic cities with 6,000 people exist, or we have things like Austin Landing, where it's not a municipality, and yet they charge an income tax, but they only charge it on the people who work in the retail businesses, not in the ones that work in the big tall towers. How many of you knew that? It's a 2% income tax if you work at Kroger or Kohl's or any of the bars and restaurants or the movie theater. But if you work in one of the tall buildings like Teradata used to, they left, or Thompson Hine or Clark Schaefer Hackett, they're excluded. Rich people don't pay taxes down there. How this happens, in a democracy, I don't know. They also do it up on Miller Lane. But they're charging an income tax on all the workers, even though it's not a municipality. This stuff has to stop. As a small business owner, having to do income taxes for every single community is expensive and hard. So, how do we do economic development that works from the bottom up? How do we give people an opportunity to actually come out of poverty? How do we give them a leg up? How do we fix some of the problems with like not having a grocery store or access to a hospital nearby and make it more affordable to live in Dayton? Well, my answer is let's make RTA free. You say, well, you're not in charge of RTA. You know, I'm not in charge of a lot of things, but if you're a city commissioner, you can talk to people. The reality is RTA collects less than 10% of their revenues from fares. So out of the $100 million a year they spend, $10 million comes from fares. You didn't know that. Probably surprises some of you. You would have thought it's much higher. Most of the money is federal tax dollars. A big chunk of the money is from a half-cent sales tax we paid for 30 years, right? So every time you buy anything, poor people buy more stuff out of their income than rich people. Rich people buy stocks and bonds, but poor people have to go and buy things like clothes or shoes and things that are taxed, right? So that half cent, we pay for that. In retail, Every retail transaction, some of that goes to RTA. So think about it. Number one, when you pull up to the bus, they gotta sit there and idle, and that's burning fuel. They gotta account for all that money, right? They have to have accountants, and they have to have some way of making sure the driver isn't pocketing any of it. That costs another 10%. So we really get down, it's maybe $9 million a year it costs. Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, they stopped putting advertising on the buses. Do you know how much money they used to get in advertising? About 5 to 6 million a year. So now we're talking, it's a couple $1 million gap. And I place a bet if everybody's riding the bus for free, they'll see advertisers might be willing to pay more, inside and outside, especially if the buses are full, right? So there's the gap. Doesn't cost anything. Some of you say, oh, why would he do that? And you can't make buses free. Well, there's a whole website of places showing places all over the world that are doing free public transit, because free public transit makes a lot of sense. Less cars on the road, less parking issues, safer drivers. And if you're talking about getting poor people to jobs, grocery stores, or downtown, or anything else, it makes sense. The funny thing is, we do have a free bus in town. How many of you have ridden the Flyer? Where's it run? Brown Street, downtown, and the Loop, right? What part of town is that? Is that the poor part of town? No, we got a free bus for the wealthiest part of town. But we can't have a free bus out to the VA, along Gettysburg. I'm telling you, there are things we can do that can put us on the map and change things. But it requires change. So I got 2 pieces of literature. This one, this one. This one you really got to take a look at, because remember, it takes 3 votes from the city commission to do anything. Right now you have 4 votes and Daryl Fairchild. Daryl's sort of the independent. He beat the party's pick to take over Joey's seat. Right now you could elect Shanice Turner-Sloss and myself and Daryl. The 3 of us, we're not backed by anybody. Nobody's pulling our strings. We're not a team. We're not a slate. We're not endorsed by the labor unions or anybody else. We're going to work for you. And the other 2 people left would be Jeff Mims and Nan. That is, if they're not indicted and wearing cuffs soon. Those 2, all of a sudden, don't have to convince one of us that they have a good idea. And I guarantee you, trying to convince me that Nan Whaley has a good idea is going to be a little difficult for her, because I haven't liked what I've seen. Issue 9 created a private school board called Learn to Earn, or the Preschool Promise, or whatever. They're paying those people 6-figure incomes to run this, and they're competing directly with Dayton Public Schools, which already had a 5-school preschool system that wasn't full. We have the buildings, we're closing buildings, we have capacity, we have the buses, we have the people. They didn't have enough money to do more, and there wasn't actually a request for more. But now we're giving your tax dollars to little old daycares run by Granny in a little house, and she's a 1-star or a 2-star and pretending daycare is preschool. It's not. There's about $4 million a year of your tax dollars going to fund this, and they're serving about 300 kids. And they're also working in Kettering, by the way, and you're paying for part of it. This is not how we run things. So that's as much of the spiel as I'm going to give you. There's lots of information on my websites. Esrati.com has been there since 2005. I was the one that broke the story about Shelley Dickstein's husband becoming the new business operations manager for the Dayton Public Schools on Monday. They're going to have it in the paper tomorrow. I was the one that broke the story about the other guy getting pepper sprayed after the sheriff said, well, rare occurrence, never happens. Showed a second one. I'm the one that pointed out that Dr. Adil Bagiroff on the Dayton Public School Board didn't even live in the district, couldn't get him to resign until he changed his voter registration all on election day, 2 months before he was out, and then he resigned after I threatened a lawsuit. But I also found out that he got $250,000 donated to him by the Azerbaijani laundromat, which is a whole nother story, and nobody would investigate. He committed voter fraud. Man should have gone to prison. Nobody would do anything. So, interesting stories, interesting community. We need a change, and I hope I have at least your consideration before Election Day. And if you like what you see, tell your friends. If you don't, tell your friends. And if you live on a main street and have a lot of traffic and you're willing to take one of my yard signs, I only put up big yard signs on main streets because the little signs in everybody's yard really aren't cost effective or that important. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for
Are there
coming.
any questions from anybody? No? I covered it all?
Yeah.
That's great. I gotta tell you though, community-based police officers do make a difference. And there's no reason we shouldn't be writing speeding tickets because nobody speeds through Oakwood. And nobody speeds through Kettering. And yeah, especially a black person. And I gotta tell you, I got blisters on both palms here because Sunday, my neighborhood, we went out and we had to clean up Dollar General at the corner of Wayne and Wyoming because we just got sick of looking at it. That wouldn't happen in other communities. And that we allow things like that to happen is criminal. It's criminal. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.